Okay, I think we're good. We've only got, near as I can tell, one of us now. One
Why is it?
one
Oh,
video. We had two.
I know, because I was just trying to log in and I have.
Here's Doyle.
I gotta.
Hi, Doyle.
Hi, Russ. Hi, Janet.
Great. Let's see. Say a few words. I'm trying to adjust volume.
Oh, I am saying a few words now with a microphone. Is that a little better? Because I'm talking and I'm still talking. And I'm
Okay, we're great.
All right, great.
Good. I got a volume set in the room here. Okay, right now we have Janet, myself. Introduce yourself to Doyle.
I am John F. Allen. Nice to meet you.
John, nice to meet you. I'm
So we
Doyle.
have 4 of the 6. We're still missing Reese. But it's good that you were able to sign in, Doyle. That means
Yes,
we're,
well, there's 2 links going on because the link from
You're
the
gonna have to sign everybody in.
2 days ago,
I can't sign in.
2 days
I don't
ago,
see
there's a link that's different from this
I'm
invite that
not
I
there yet. I have to re-sign in.
okay. Let me see about. I should see the, they should come into a waiting room like Doyle did. So Doyle, did you get my forwarded
I did.
email?
I read all that. That is a lot of good, very recent content that's capturing a lot of the things we're thinking about, huh?
Reese is trying to sign in.
Oh, I don't even see him. Can you admit him? I don't see
I
Reese.
can't. I can't sign in as I.
Well, you need it. I'm not hosting, so somehow I'm not host.
Oh, you're the
There were
host.
there were 2 links. You sent one the other day that was
I'm the host. Yes, the second, I sent one link. I only sent you guys one link.
yes, but I'm looking at an email from, let me see.
It says that I'm the host, Speed City.
Are you signed in as Speed City Sisters in Crime?
I'm putting in the chat the one that I used. And that worked. That's where I am now. But there was a different one that I'll find in a moment that others.
You're
might
on
be-
there twice now.
I'm on from there.
I know
There's
from
Reese.
police. All right.
Yeah, but you're on, you have 2 pictures up there on the screen,
Yeah, I know.
which is okay. You're in the Speed City Sisters. Hi, Reese.
Hi, thanks, Doyle. That was the better link. Yeah, I was.
All right. Others saw that email, hopefully, and then we'll use that same link to get here. I'm
And,
confused by why my name is on each of these squares. I don't know if
Here's
that's
John Allen. Hi, Doyle. Oops, you're not Doyle Groves.
Yeah, I'm not either. Fascinating. No.
Well, we have all of the panel members here, which is, you need to, Brian, you need to rename yourself, I think. You coming in,
know.
Doyle.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. That'll get really confusing. Okay, where's the rename here?
And Reese coming in as Doyle Groves.
Oh, yes, so I am. Yeah.
Yeah, if you both rename
But
yourself,
we're all
I think we'll
Doyle.
be ready to go.
Yeah.
It's like an AI glitch of some
Yeah,
kind.
yeah,
Tell you
yeah,
what, since you have that, you have the camera on over there, I'm gonna use this one
yeah.
to share
Yeah, we don't want to do a remake of Spartacus, so,
kind of the two of us over here.
yeah,
That works.
yeah.
No, but you are the host. You want to make. But both of us was screwing it up because we were both signed in as Speed City Sisters in Crime.
They're high value.
Okay.
Of course, Spartacus ended with 10,000 crosses on the Appian Way, so, yeah.
Not end well.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We are all here waiting for
Mhm.
attendees.
But they won't come in on, well, I don't know where they're gonna come in.
We have 7 attendees.
Yeah, Reach, you're still Doyle.
I don't quite know how to fix that, but I'll just go with it.
They hit the little buttons in the, if you've got 3 buttons in the upper right-hand corner of the window that shows you, there's a rename in the drop-down.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Here we go.
Okay,
Although you just rejected a license to say the most controversial things you could possibly
You see
think of
people
and not
trying to
have to
sign
take the
on.
rap, so.
but I'm
They,
not.
they don't need to. They just need, they're being admitted automatically.
Mhm.
They're being admitted in.
Okay, people who are signing in, please enter your name and where you're from in the chat, please.
So you don't get that very difficult, they want people to mute. They are not directly.
Audio through there, right?
Yes. As far as our 3 audios are through there. But now your audio is probably through your computer here.
But it's,
That's what
that's why I just
You
muted
had
myself,
2,
so.
right.
So we
You had
can't, we need
2
one
in the
audio.
same room, but
We've got 11 people in the are attending right now.
And the live audience.
Wow, we have attendees from New Jersey, Charlotte, North Carolina, Minnesota, Central Florida. Incredible. Yeah, please let us know your name. And if you'd like to, if you would like to get a link to the recording, we're going to make it this, you'll need to send us an email address so we can send you how to download the recording. I think we can get started though.
Actually, it'll be available through our website.
Okay, the Sisters in Crime,
Speed City.
Speed City Sisters in Crime.org website. John, I think we just ought to get started. Fort Wayne. Southwest Florida. Go for it.
I muted my, can folks hear me online?
Yes,
Okay, I just wanted to be sure you could hear me because I have to mute my own computer so we're not echoing in here.
otherwise.
Right now we have people still slowly trickling in. So I think I'll do kind of a slow warm up to give folks time to get in. My name is Janet Williams. I am the secretary of the Speed City chapter of Sisters in Crime. And I'm been working with Russ and John and Doyle, Brian, and Reese to set up this program today on artificial intelligence. And my original title was Promise or Peril. And they all said, no, it's Promise and Peril because it's really both. There are a lot of like exciting opportunities with this whole new world of artificial intelligence. Almost like the boom that we saw in our ability to access information at the touch of a finger when you could just go online and be connected to the internet and a whole world of information. So we're seeing a revolution, and we started talking about this program several months ago. We started talking about it and what to do and how to pull it together back in April. And I've got to tell you, the landscape has changed, I think, fairly dramatically since April. What you have today is a writer's strike in Hollywood. And one of the issues is the degree to which producers of programming on everything from Netflix to your traditional television network will use artificial intelligence to craft stories and programs, to the use of images and voices of the acting talent to kind of flesh that out. We're coming up on an election, and if any of you listen to National Public Radio, one of the subjects being discussed on tomorrow's weekend edition program will be the use of artificial intelligence in campaigns, political campaigns. That happens to be where I spent a lot of my professional life, covering campaigns and those issues. So can false, phony ads be created with people's voices and images? What can we trust? How can we use artificial intelligence to be better creators of what we do? How can we, what are the perils? And that's what we have today with our panel. What I'd like to do is provide a quick introduction to our panel here. In pointing to him right here, and in the panel, next to me is our Russ Eberhardt, who writes cyber thrillers as Ross Carley, and teacher and writer John Allen. Reese Hirsch, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a little earlier in the day on the West Coast for you, but he writes a series of thrillers and crime fiction. And he's an attorney based in San Francisco. Brian Foote is joining us from Illinois, and Doyle Groves is kind of a computer expert from here in Indianapolis. So kind of one at a time. Russ, then John, would you kind of introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do and what you bring to the panel?
Okay, well, as Janice said, I write as Ross Carley. Name on my driver's license is Russ Eberhardt. I am Professor Emeritus, Purdue School of Engineering and Technology. And I have published now 5 novels, mainly in the murder mysteries, but also cyber crime, cyber terror subjects. My latest one is Three-Legged Assassin, which is here. But going back further, I have a background way back I have a PhD in engineering, but I also served in the military, where I was in what I call the oxymoron agency, or military intelligence. And coming out of that, then got into a field in academia. Oops, didn't mean to. In something called computational intelligence, which is a subset, or if you will, of AI. One of my books, I have 4 books published in that area. This one is called Swarm Intelligence. It's my bestseller, helped put my son through Purdue, went through several printings. So that I started getting involved in these areas that we now call artificial intelligence in about 1988, 1989 at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab. And I'll give you one early example of work I did. I used something called neural networks to generate music, training it with music Americana. Making a long story short, a very talented young woman in Singapore recorded it, and it was broadcast on the BBC while I was in Singapore keynoting a conference in 1990. The reason I bring that up is that the new big AI engines, generative AI, Chat GPT particularly, use these artificial neural networks to train themselves. So the technology is not new. It's at least new stuff is coming along all the time, but the Chat GPT is using to me, very mature technology. I won't say old, but mature technology to train itself. And later on, I'll be talking about a couple of things that are both promising and concerning me. Yes, I'm recording.
Thanks. Sorry, I was just
But
asking.
want to make sure everybody knows that also. I
Yeah.
guess you had to click something when you signed in, but we are recording this. I'm done.
Thanks.
John?
John,
Hello, my name is John F. Allen. I am a writer of speculative fiction primarily, but I do also write mysteries and thrillers. Right now, I only have that genre in short stories, but I have secured a deal to publish my first full-length novel, noir mystery. As far as my background is concerned, I'm a native, lifelong resident of Indianapolis, Indiana, and I've been writing professionally for about 10 years now. But I started writing short stories as early as the second grade. And it's just a love of reading and a love of writing that has brought me to this point in my career. As far as my contributions where this panel is concerned, I am a member of Generation X, and we were the generation that bridged the gap between the baby boomers and the millennials. So we got all that old school before internet, before all of the technology, and it was developing right as we were developing, and but we weren't born with it. So that gives me a perspective that I came up with the technology with regards to my timeline of my life, but I remember a time before it, and I was not immersed in it from birth like the millennials. So I'm very much self-taught when it comes to technology, but I have a background in visual arts as well as writing. So AI has touched a lot of what I've done in both fields, and I have a lot to say about it.
thanks, John. Yeah, I came up in the age of typewriters and copy paper and Xeroxes. So yeah, that's another generation entirely. Doyle, would you talk a little bit about yourself and your kind of area of expertise here?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Doyle. I am a systems engineer who has been involved in systems that are text oriented. There's the internet itself, and there's a lot of text flowing back and forth. So to do text mining, to look for interesting things, is something I've done for years. I have spent time with Russ, who's also on this panel, Ross Carley, with him as my mentor in some of whatever machine learning and AI is. I've enjoyed working with interesting people that are kind of really thinking of what the state of the art is and can help put in context what's happening now, what's happened really. This is a multi-year overnight success thing that we're talking about here. So my quick kind of application areas are, I do some work with Indiana University with a couple of labs that study social media data, and there's a ton of text there. And to take big swaths of something and quickly summarize it, that's something we've been doing successfully for a few years already. But we now have these tools that can help us put a very nice a nice summary on the end of the last step of that process. Instead of saying these few topics happened and this word cloud is what resulted, that word cloud to instead be a nice sentence or a paragraph that describes things in very readable form. That's the direct application that I'm enjoying with this new set of tools. So as a practitioner engineer, I'm excited about new abilities there. As a code writer developer, I have a new sidekick that helps me do these things. But I also see how it's rather disruptive to a lot of status quo fields. A lot of the creative endeavors especially have a lot of things to think about and to prepare for. I hope that whatever I contribute today will be kind of mixed, because I see both of these sides. I see that there will be change. It will be different, but we've been through these changes before. And I want to talk about how those look before and after, how this one looks. We're very much in the before and just getting our arms around it. But there are versions of what is to come that are different and might be jarring, but let's understand that and adapt to that and fight it a little, but realize that there's just disruptive change afoot. And we need to try to understand it, to understand how to fit into it personally. And as groups of creative people, I'm thrilled to talk to this group today about just what those challenges are. So thanks for the chance.
Thank you. Reese, would you talk a little bit about yourself, what you write, and your thoughts on this subject? And you're kind of you're a lawyer and the kind of law that you've practiced.
Sure. I'm Reese Hirsch in San Francisco, and the author of 6 thrillers, and all of them deal with privacy and cybersecurity to one degree. And all of them are drawn to a certain extent from my other life as a privacy and cybersecurity attorney. I'm the co-head of the privacy and cybersecurity practice for Morgan Lewis, an international law firm. And so, my daily life involves helping companies respond to ransomware attacks, security breaches, complying with privacy laws. And now in that practice, artificial intelligence is a big part of sort of the cutting edge issues. In a week or so, I'm going to be speaking to a conference of Blue Cross Blue Shield attorneys about the use of artificial intelligence in the healthcare industry and some of the privacy issues related to that. And my latest book is Dark Tomorrow. It features FBI Special Agent Lisa Tanchik, who investigates cyber crimes. So I wrote 2 books featuring that character, and before that, 3 books featuring Chris Bruin, who's a former Department of Justice cyber crimes prosecutor and that now in private practice. And if you read the Chris Bruin books, you would think that the life of a privacy attorney is full of thrills and chills and danger. And it was a little exaggerated, but I do deal with a lot of very scary issues in my practice. And I think I bring kind of a dual approach to these AI issues. As a creator, I have a lot of skepticism about AI, but as a privacy attorney, I'm accustomed to dealing with new technologies and helping companies negotiate them and sort of deal with them in a legally compliant manner. So I think hopefully trying to take a balanced approach to this.
Yeah, you're actually our Peril and Promise guy on the panel. Brian.
Brian is too.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, I think I can probably help play that role too. My writing, unfortunately, I haven't done much fiction, and my nonfiction writing is colorful by the standards of computer science, but probably dull by most people's standards. I live in Urbana, Illinois, and I live there because I've been affiliating one way or another with the research world my entire career. During the 80s, I was working in a brainwave lab at the Department of Psychology. We collect brain waves and see if we could figure out what, for instance, fighter pilots were thinking. But there was a lot of military money in those days, and the goal was basically to see whether or not we could give fighter pilots in Edge and firing their weapon systems. You know, you would be able to see if there was an intent to use your weapon system and buy them 100 or 200 milliseconds by figuring it out beforehand. And it turned out you can do that, only maybe with 90% accuracy, which is pretty good for most anything except firing a weapon system. So that never went there, but we got to do a lot of cool basic research that involved state-of-the-art computers as a consequence. And as a result of that, I was able to get my hands on what were then the most advanced computing resources of that generation, Cray XMPs, what have you. And I've become aware of something, this has come up already, of neural networks. And my degrees are in psychology and computer science. And the reason I got into both those fields is I was fascinated from childhood with the question of how did biology come up with something that can do the kinds of things we can do, that can compute, that can think, that can talk, that can remember. And I got exposed to a technology called a paper about neural network technology by a fellow by the name of Hopfield that described what a neural network was. And I went home and I could do it in those days. I had one of the first personal computers and actually built one of these neural network simulations and had a road to Damascus moment. At that point, I immediately understood how something with the kind of structure that nature had already come up with could both remember things and generate new things from its previous state of having remembered something and perceived something.
Sure.
And at that point, it was checkmate in 50 moves to having a basic understanding of how all of this might be possible. And that's what led me back to grad school to study things like neural networks and object-oriented programming. And so I find myself now, after November 30th of last year, having this moment where both of those things converged, and we finally have powerful enough technology to realize the potential of those things. And that's fascinating. There's a lot of things to be said about it, and I won't filibuster my intro any further to get it the rest of those on the table. On with the show. Yeah.
Yes. They can all share screen.
Okay, what we're gonna do is, a lot of us are kind of new to AI. We have a panel of experts who kind of understand it. I know myself, I've just been playing around with it a little over the past couple of weeks to understand some of the capabilities. But what I thought is we could take a couple of minutes and allow a couple of our panelists to actually share. First, I was going to ask John Allen. He's used it a lot for graphic capability, and I thought he could do like a really quick demo.
And I am having some.
He's having some issues getting connected.
Yeah.
So I can hold off on that for a minute while he gets connected. Doyle, if you could connect, we talked about doing just kind of a little experiment and show how the chat GPT can actually work to create something. Are you ready for that, Doyle?
Sure. I have what is literally a blank page, because here's ChatGPT. This is GPT-4. If you all haven't seen this before or done this, I hope that's one of the takeaways is to go. We encourage you to go spend time with either this one or some of the other ones that are out there, because spending time with it is the way to kind of understand what's possible and what it's about. And with this blank page, I thought I would take a quick suggestion or two, a couple of nouns and verbs in Mad Lib fashion from the audience, improv style, to say, let's write a 300 or 400 word treatment or short story about just anything under the sun, just to show that it's a live demo. And I'm just going to start typing that very fact, please.
If you're online, if you want to type an idea, or riding, R-I-D-I-N-G, a skateboard.
Awesome.
Yeah, Karen Phillips is online with us. Karen is from Sacramento, California, is a fellow Sisters in Crime person and designs covers for novels. So anyway, give you a little bit of a plug, Karen. So
That's what you said. You said riding a skateboard, right, Janet?
riding a
Yeah.
skateboard.
I'm gonna stop right there
Bobby-
and just see what happens. Oh,
Okay,
go ahead.
wait, before
Yeah,
we go, we got a couple more ideas here.
Please.
And in riding that skateboard,
Yeah.
in a park where there are pythons. And finding a body at the same time.
All right, I'm going
Let's-
to,
let's-
Yeah, that ought to get it rolling. Yeah,
Let's see what it can
So-
do.
yeah, that's
yeah.
something that might just fill this page.
so you
and-
see it, it's already generating the story.
Mhm. The Python Park. That's funny.
Got our attention right away.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to read.
It is, and let me see if I can.
Yeah, you can zoom.
Holy crap. We have a comment from one of our attendees. saying,
Yeah.
Holy crap, watching the story unfold.
A sanctuary for writers and reptiles alike.
Yeah.
So I'm about to say and scene because this is in
The wheels on the
progress.
concrete, the rustle of the trees, the gentle sliver of pythons.
Yeah. The gentle slither. That's good.
So I we've done this. This is both exhilarating and interesting, and it's probably concerning, maybe terrifying. It's a lot of things at once. So here's our, that was our 1 minute demo of something. Show this tool is available freely for everyone to try. If you're not trying this after this seminar today, then we hope that inspires you to put your hands on these tools and just.
Doyle, did you save that? Can you transmit that?
Oh yeah, I will. I'll
Yeah.
put that in the chat.
Send it, I guess send it to me and Janet. And to Janet, and we'll distribute it to anybody who wants it.
Okay.
I did a one-liner I can show you if you're game.
Please do it.
Ah,
Okay, yeah, you'll have
You,
to,
John.
you'll have to give me the
You've
share.
got your own
Yeah,
video.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, can I do it? Let's see. Share
okay,
screen.
John is connecting to audio.
Okay, where was it? This one. I asked Chat GPT to, let's see if we've got it covered up. Just write me a treatment for a streaming miniseries. I was thinking about the writer's strike in 19th century, about a 19th century Dodge madam who solves crime based on confidential information only she and her charges are privy to. This is what it gave me. Series titled The Duchess of Dodge, and it comes up with thumbnails for 10 different episodes. Then I asked it, go ahead, flesh out one of the episodes. And here we go. It starts generating the parts for the characters, the individual lines, told it to keep going. I mean, this thing would have probably generated, the entire episode as in a series of repeated prompts in probably under 5 minutes. And at that point, you can start giving it guidance. I thought about tossing it something like, oh, wait, make it a brothel in New Orleans in, 1910 or something like that, just to spin it. It will do that. I could probably pitch that now, but I don't want to beat it to death.
John?
John, are you connected?
I am connected.
You should be able to share your screen.
Here come, and John Allen, what we wanted to do is have a couple of examples so you can kind of see in real life. Yeah, there's a question. Can somebody answer this while John is getting hooked up? How from Nichelle Seeley, how does one access chat?
The answer's up there already.
Oh,
Okay.
Brian already answered it. So
Yeah,
I see the whole screen, so thanks. So,
Yeah, create an account. You'll like it. Yeah.
yeah, it's fun to play with. What I found is I kind of plugged in some stuff I was already working on to see where it would go. And I didn't like the writing, but it came up some pretty good titles. And I usually struggle coming up with titles. You ready to go, John?
Unfortunately, my computer is acting goofy and I cannot, while I'm connected here to Zoom, to get any of the pictures or anything that I would want.
When you click share screen, what happens?
Well, that's all well and good, but I have to get to the pictures, and every time I try to go to the pictures, my program freezes up. So like, I don't have.
You click on what you want to share.
Right, but it's not coming up on my computer.
Well,
Okay.
that's okay.
That's what I'm trying to.
John, if you happen to be able to get on, we can come back to that. But what we'll do right now is kind of just proceed with the discussion. I thought I'd kind of break it up into two parts, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the promise. We just witnessed how quickly, based with various scenarios, the chat GPT can kind of crank up either a screenplay or a short story based on ideas here. Anyhow, I'd really like to hear, Reese, I'd really like to hear from you about where you see the promise of tools like this, as we're talking about research, the writing, the editing process, and so forth.
Sure. Like, I went on Chat GPT 3.5
You're breaking
and,
up a little bit.
oh, okay. I hope that's better. But I basically took the plot of one of my previous novels, Black Nowhere, which is based on the true life story of Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road dark web network and the FBI investigation that brought him down, and asked them to outline a thriller based upon sort of the key plot points. And one thing it does is it generates an outline of a thriller or a mystery amazingly quickly. And it does, hit the basic beats, the formulaic beats of a mystery or thriller. And it can be a helpful reminder of kind of what those basic beats are. Of course, what it produces in outline form is a pretty generic version of the story with none of the sort of unique twists and turns that really make a book sing. But it's an incredibly powerful tool. And I think for a lot of authors out there, one interesting exercise is to search under your name and see what it knows about you. Whether it's combed your existing copyrighted works, and it's pretty easy to tell that. You can determine that very quickly, and that raises legal issues that are still playing out today. Like there are a couple of lawsuits that are pending. One was brought by Sarah Silverman and another Christopher Golden, and there's another lawsuit involving the author Paul Tremblay, and they're basically asserting that because these copyrighted works, often sort of black market versions of those copyrighted works, were used to train the AI, that the AI itself involves a copyright violation. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because the Authors Guild is taking the position that there should be some kind of collective license for copyrighted authors, where a company like OpenAI, which operates ChatGPT, should pay some lump sum to the Authors Guild that would be doled out to copyright holders. And all of that's all very much in flux, but I guess to get back to your initial question, Janet, I think there's some things that ChatGPT is good at, like maybe generating a rough outline, marketing copy. It's pretty good at marketing copy. And I'm going to be moderating a panel at VoucherCon in a few weeks on technology and thrillers. And I think it's going to do a great job of generating questions for that panel. And I intend to sort of highlight for the panel the ones that are coming from ChatGPT. So, you know, it's a mixed bag, but I think we're still exploring, you know, the uses of it. And I can't say I've tested it, you know, thoroughly. I'm kind of skeptical in some respects, but there is one author, Stephen Marche, who has already published a novella called Death of an Author that was, you know, purportedly generated entirely by AI, at least with the guidance of the author. And so, and I think the way that that Stephen Marche said that he did it, okay, I've got that information here somewhere. He basically used ChatGPT as like a first pass. And then there were a couple of other programs that were used to kind of polish it. And I think he used something called Sudowrite, Sudowrite, to make the sentences longer or shorter. And then he used something called Cohere to create what he called the best lines in the book, where he would, you know, for similes and metaphors, he would provide a few examples of like the smell of coffee. And then this Cohere program would generate several different options and he would choose the best one. But it was purportedly a novella that was generated almost entirely by AI. Gimmicky, yes.
I want to ask him a question.
I think that raises an issue, though, about what is the role of the creator? And is the role of the creator becoming irrelevant? When you talk about all of these tools that can do so much of the writing process. And it'd be great if I could get everybody to weigh in a little bit. I think John raised his hand. John, could you talk a moment about that?
Yes, so my position is pretty cut and dry with this technology. Putting a prompt into a computer and having it generate something for you, to me is kind of cheating, especially if you're going to use this as some published material. As you well know, anyone who's been writing a while knows that some people who have not studied writing or the craft of writing tend to think that whatever they come up with is just great. It's fantastic. It's the bee's knees. And they decide that they want to just put it out there. And in the early days of self-publishing, this happened quite a bit. People did not seek out professional editors to edit their work, and they just put it out there, and you saw the atrocities that came from this. How is unregulated AI work any different when you have people who, oh, I'm a writer? Well, are you? Because have you studied the craft of writing? Have you actually put in the time, the effort to create something, or did you just type in a prompt? I'm not saying that the technology is without merit. It does have merit to people who can use it as a tool, not as the all end all. You can't say that you're an artist, a visual artist, and you don't understand the concepts of art. You don't understand hue. You don't understand color. You don't understand how the color wheel works, how shapes define atoms. If you don't understand that and you just decide that you're going to have a computer do it for you, I can't call you an artist. I call you a computer operator, because that's what you are. You are manipulating a computer program to do something that you do not even understand. And to me, people who are of that ilk need regulation, and this technology needs regulation. As a tool for people who have actually studied the craft, I'm all for that. But when it comes to the layman who comes out and decides that I want to be a writer, because I've heard that so many times, well, I always wanted to be a writer. Well, why aren't you? Well, I never had the time. Well, I didn't have the time either, because I was a full-time dad. I was a full-time worker at something else. But you know what? I made the time. So I think that to not to put too fine of a point on it or whatnot, there is a lot of promise as long as this technology is regulated. But there's a lot of peril when it comes to people who misuse it. And they are. They misused the internet when it first came out. They're going to misuse this, and it needs to be regulated, in my opinion.
Russ, you had
Yeah,
a question.
I have a question for Reese back to the copyright issue. It's interesting to me. I just was trying to read up on this a little bit, but you're the attorney. There is a policy, or there's a concept called fair use, which says that it's part of US copyright law that protects the unlicensed use of copyrighted works for things like scholarship and research. And some people are claiming in these lawsuits that people are learning that ChatGPT is learning from copyrighted material, in a way that's similar to students or research people. So where do you think the concept of fair use comes in, and is it valid for AI?
Well, caveat, I'm a privacy attorney, not a copyright intellectual property attorney, but I do think that's going to be a key issue. And there's certain permitted uses of copyrighted material for journalism and satire and other purposes like that are deemed to have a public value. But I think it's an open issue. I think we're going to have to see how these lawsuits play out. I guess one of the problems is that, in some ways the genie's out of the bottle, because once your works have been sort of ingested by, OpenAI or another large language model, there's no getting them out again. You can't really opt out. All you can do is, potentially, receive some compensation for the works that have been, used to train the AI. But so I think it's a great question, Russ, but I think it's one that the courts are going to settle, for the first time in the next year or so. And I also wanted to say, to the earlier point, that I think that what's great about the act of writing fiction and reading fiction is that it's sort of the closest you can get to another human being's sensibility, what they find interesting, what they're thinking, what they how they use language. And I think that it's an incredibly personal thing, a special thing. And I think if you use a computer to generate that, I think, and particularly if you don't disclose that, I think it's a little bit of a matter of false advertising, because you're representing to the reader that they're getting one thing, a relationship to a particular human author, and they may be getting something else, which is a product of AI. So I think that at a minimum, the laws would probably say that you need to have transparency and disclosure when you're using AI.
I want to mention, by the way, I'm looking forward to being on your panel at VoucherCon again. I think it's about the third in a row.
Our second panel together.
Well, I wanted
third, actually.
Third, yeah.
Well, anyhow, I wanted to, one of our folks online, Peril, Emmanuel, has a question for Reese. If I generate a short story in ChatGPT, which uses copyrighted material, can I be sued? And kind of an adjunct to that is another question that somebody else raised is, if you create something completely in ChatGPT, no matter what it is, who owns it? So that's kind of twofold. And I'd like to start with Reese, but I'd also like to hear from the rest of the panel on that subject.
Well, once again, not a copyright attorney, but I'll take a shot at that. I would say that right now, probably inevitably, if you're using ChatGPT to create short stories and fiction, you're using copyrighted works to a certain extent. But at a practical level, these lawsuits are going to be aimed at the developers of AI, not at individual authors. Although that could happen, later on if certain, chat GPT generated works are commercially sold by publishers, you could get into that issue. But I think right now that's a little further down the line. I think the big target for lawsuits are the developers of AI, like OpenAI.
I think the Copyright Office has already said that a machine cannot be an author. You own, if you take material from that source and then turn it around and present it, it's your material for better or worse. If there's a copyright claim against the material, you own it and you have to litigate it. So I think that's the current state of play with respect to that, according to the Copyright Office, is such.
Right. I think the Authors Guild is taking
Susan
that
got it,
position
yeah,
also.
right, yeah.
I have a question
Go ahead.
for any one of my esteemed panelists who can answer this question. Is AI generated or CPU chat sophisticated enough to only take, say for instance, me as a published author, my work. So I put in a prompt and it only reviews my work to come up with a generated story, as opposed to just anything on the internet. Because if it did, then I would feel a lot better about the whole situation, because it's mining something that I've already created. Then I could take what it generates and reshape it or edit it to a point to where it's taking my own work and I'm using my own work as opposed to anyone out there in the interweb.
Doyle, can you jump in on that one?
You're mute.
The general collection of everything that's already in ChatGPT, if you're famous enough, maybe you have some stuff in there and you can have that conversation you imagine. But if you're not, there are options to sort of train a baby copy of your own little AI model that's right there on your desktop, has all of your stuff in it. There are ways to build those sort of things that do just what you're describing. Here's everything I've ever done, just me personally. Now let me ask that pile of stuff questions to do stuff. But this bridges on this new category of thing that is emerging, which is, and you touched on it already, John, about how if you ask this tool to help me do anything, I feel like the work product will be me and this tool, and it's important to disclose that. It's different from what was before, which was absolutely 100% human generated. But something that struck me recently is the parallel in music stuff, because 20 or 30 years ago, there became a lot of new tools to create drum sounds, to create orchestral sounds in a keyboard that has voices that you can choose. And people can create a sonically accurate set of stuff from this synthetically generated tool set. One person is doing the work of what is ostensibly there for dozens of people in an orchestra that should be doing that. And this is when it struck me, as a couple of weeks ago, I was watching some orchestra work, and I thought this will always endure. No matter what keyboard synthetic thing there is, there will always be an audience for this plethora of things, from the purely pure and organic in the orchestra pit to one person who has some ideas but doesn't have an orchestra at their disposal, but they do have this box that can generate stuff. They create content. There's an audience for that has commerce and success. There's an audience for the old stuff that is analog, that is vinyl, that is other things that are synthetic. There's a new category in literature that will emerge. It doesn't exist yet, and it's weird to imagine, but there's 100% human developed stuff. This new thing that has the sidekick involved, how to label that, like, is it 50% generated, or is it, there's so many questions about exactly how to do that. That's what has us all kind of concerned, but there will be space for that sort of thing to exist, and for audiences to know the difference and to patronize one or the other or both as they see fit. And the lucky ones will put a stamp seal of approval on their covers that says this was 100% human People will lie about that too. I know that. But the ones who do that will have their own audience that knows that a human is behind it. That will mean something to them, even if they see what you could compare scientifically the output of both and say, this passes for human. The volume will be there. Let's not fear that as much as knowing that these two things can coexist. So those are a few thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, you make an interesting point, especially about the music tools. I know personally, I've made some home videos and put together my own GarageBand score behind it.
Yes.
Just to dig around, and believe me, I'm not a musician, and I wouldn't even.
But that soundtrack was fine, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
nice.
I mean, it's just my home video.
Real
I'm not,
yeah.
but I'm not passing it off. I'm not passing it off.
Well,
as
you
anything
cost
other
somebody
than
some
what it
work
is.
by not having a union musician writing your soundtrack, Janet. I'm kidding, but that's the kind of things that are available to us now.
Yeah,
Well, you know,
well,
that author, Stephen Marche, who did the novel Death of an Author, in an interview, he actually was saying that it's like hip hop because, you know, I may not be able to play the drums, but, you know, I can operate a drum machine, and I have to understand still, you know, how to use beats and, you know,
sure.
and then what a hook is, but I'm using a tool.
Well,
And yeah, go ahead.
scholarship in the age of sampling, raises those
Yes.
kinds of issues. And of
Yes.
course, the people who have worked hard for their expertise take umbrage. I mean, one way we found that you can figure out whether ChatGPT thinks you're famous enough to be worthy of, having a decent discourse about you if you ask it to pretend that the person is dead and write an obituary. If you don't get the boilerplate obituary, but you get something that sounds like you kind of know that you're famous enough, and at that point you can delve into your works. But one of the things I used to like to ask people during the baseball steroid era, which is another one of these places where skill is very hierarchical, if Einstein had been shown to use an intellectual performance enhancing substance, would be asking him to give back his Nobel Prize. That's the kind of issue that we're grappling with now. These things are can be incredibly assistive if used as directive. And of course, there's going to be a certain undermining of a lot of well-won scars and skills in the process of doing that. But once we get there is going to be an assistive capacity that has a potential to accelerate everything in some interesting directions that we haven't quite seen yet. One of the things I like one of the things that's important to keep in mind about this is if you ask ChatGPT how many books could a person read in a lifetime reasonably, you'll get a number something like 10,000, a third of a book a day for a lifetime. If you look at the training corpus for ChatGPT, it's about the equivalent of 100 million books. So this model of this vast swath of human discourse is 10,000 times more vast than any of the kind of experience of that same material than any of us could ever have. That's what you have access to using this tool. That's what we're privy to. That's what we're afraid of. It's not a fake being. Instead, it's a swath of this huge piece of the meme pool where you can wander into a conversation and say, how would this likely be completed given a certain kind of context? And you can set that context. That's what this thing really is. It's when you hear musicians say, I don't know where this material came from. I didn't create it. It just came from someplace. The entire, the English language is 400 years old. We didn't invent any of these memes. We've all ingested them over a lifetime. There's this huge swath of written and oral material that is our heritage. And somehow we assimilate pieces of it and we create things with it. And looking at what the language models can do gives you a sense of just how vast and powerful that is, and a sense of humility about it too. I mean, creativity is collective. None of us could do this if we lived in a cave. So.
And that may be an argument that someone may use in the justification of AI, as that we aren't alone. We are influenced by every and anything that we can have experienced or we can conceptualize is based upon our reality of what we see, what we experience, what we feel, what we think. And the only thing that makes us individuals is the fact that we are the only people who can interpret these external factors and internal factors in the specific way based on those unique in collective experiences and feelings. So that being said, going back to what I believe it was Reese that said, you know, we have the emotions, we have that uniqueness that the computer does not have, and hopefully never will, because to me that signals Skynet, and that's not good, or an awry Isaac Asimov novel. But at this juncture, I think that it's important that we understand that there is a difference between having influences from things we've read, things we've seen, things we've experienced, and putting that into our craft, into our writing, as opposed to a synthetic program taking bits and pieces of everything worldwide and trying to put that together on our behalf. You know, we have to understand that, and we have to have people, especially people outside of our writing community, to understand them. I think that's going to be very important moving into the future with this type of technology.
Russ, I was just going to ask you to kind of weigh in and talk a little bit about how, you know, a tool like AI can kind of be used in, you know, kind of a research process.
Okay, yeah, I think one of the benefits I see to the AI tool, generative AI tools, is for authors to do research. And I'll give you one specific example. In my follow-on to the Three-Legged Assassin, which I'm about 3/4 finished with, there's part of the storyline involves human sex trafficking. It involves Eastern European organized crime. It involves some other stuff. So I asked ChatGPT, tell me about sex trafficking, human sex trafficking, organized crime, and Romania, and how that links to other organizations, organized crime and others. That's basically what I asked it for, and within 4 seconds, I got back about 4 pages of very, very interesting material. Now, of course, you would ask yourself how much of that is accurate. Now, if I were writing a paper for a scientific publication, I'd be a little worried about some of that, but I'm writing fiction. Okay, so if I'm writing fiction and some of those facts aren't quite right, I need to consider whether I want to put some stuff in that I'm not sure of. But I think it's a different kettle of fish in some ways than people who would, if I were writing a journal paper on feedback neural networks, I don't think I would necessarily trust what I got out of ChatGPT as well. And there are examples of that. I asked some questions that were more technically oriented, and I got back book references, and I looked at the book references and they didn't even exist. In other words, it was making up references. And so that's just promises and perils. You have to be very careful with this stuff. I'm okay using it for research for fiction. I'm not so sure that I'm that happy with it for anything much else.
We actually had a question to that point from Bobby. Does ChatGPT produce factual information? Does it make stuff up? or is it user selectable? I think we just heard that some of it's made up.
And it's called hallucinations. I see somebody posted that the word, the term that's been used for that is AI hallucinations. And Brian knows all about that.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate choice of words. I mean, hallucination actually sounds kind of cool, or at least really vivid. And I think when about 6 months before ChatGPT came out, there was this little surge of interest in artificial intelligence because of the picture generation programs like Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. And as a consequence, you could get some really bizarre visual images. So they started calling this fundamental property of neural networks hallucination. I think it's probably fairer to say that you're conflating things at the edges of the capacity of a neural network. One of the things I like to say to people is conflating things, this penchant to get sloppy at the edges of what you knew is a fundamental, and I think you'll agree, it's a fundamental property of neural networks. They have a certain capacity. They're not a database. You know, it isn't remembering things. It isn't regurgitating things. The style of learning, and this is the thing that's fascinated me about them, since the first time I was exposed to them, is broadly speaking similar to the way that biological organisms learn. And as a result, you're going to have the same kind of uncertainty and fuzziness at the edges of what you can remember that we do. And that has bearings on the legal implications of this. This isn't copy and pasting in any realistic sense. It really is regenerating the same sequence of words in the case of large language models, that in the same manner that we presumably do it too in our brain centers, and the Wernicke and Broca's areas for recognition and generation. So as a consequence, you can't really say it stole it. It's kind of generating these sequences of thought, if you will, in the same manner that we do, and it has the same propensity to get sloppy at the edges, and so you do have to check it, and it's not going to go away. They can't really fix that, not at the edges of some of this sort of recall. I've had it, nail my bibliography up to a certain point and then start making up things at the edge of it because I'm not that famous, and that is not, it's going to be a really tough problem to make that go away. It's a feature, and it's an interesting feature, and it's one of the ways that they get the kind of ability to generalize in certain contexts. You can often fix it by changing the contextual information that the large language model is working with and get a better answer. I've been able to get some of those references back by just giving it a few more clues. And it's completely reasonable that that's what a neural network with that many layers would do.
So,
Right,
I mean, so what I wanted to follow up on is it's not doing the research with ChatGPT is not the same as doing a Google search for information, right?
Correct.
Because of the neural aspect that you're talking about, which.
Although there is nonsense on out in the world of Google as well, but no, it's not an index database search in the sense that it just leads you to a document that is the place that got the information, and then you get to decide whether the document's authoritative, because it's not in any sense really Xeroxing or storing or doing what a database does with that information. It's recreating it, quote, from memory in the same style as we do, and so it's prone to the same sorts of rabbit holes that you see every day. Now, could you imagine a technology where it went out to a database and cross-checked it? Sure. And will they be doing that? I imagine they will, and I think people are tinkering with it. But
yeah, I'd like Doyle take it and answer
Real
that.
quick, I just want to add to that really quickly, because the motivation for how this machine works is, you would assume that it's about facts and truth, but it's actually a little different than that, because it's kind of in two parts. The smarts from this model is what it is, but it does what it does, and it's numbers until the very last step. To put a wrapper around it that has language that we understand, the thing that ChatGPT is a thing that is designed to give us the answer that we find the most pleasing. They did a lot of reinforcement learning to ask the model this question, whatever comes back. The testing that took place last year before they released it was just letting people test it. Is this answer better than that one over and over again? What answer pleases the user the most is the goal of this thing, which is different than to get the most truthy, factual answer. That motivation underlying is helpful to know why this fast and loose with the truth and this hallucination stuff. It happens because, again, the goal was not to give you the most factual thing. It's to give you the thing you will think is most liked or something like that, if it makes sense. And real quick, one more metaphor is that if your smart friend like Sarah Silverman, the comic, and has memorized all of her routines and can go recite anything about that, you talk to your friend. This is like your smart friend who's read everything, maybe can't tell you about individual documents they saw, but just has the sense of everything that's ever happened to let you ask questions and to hold that person somehow liable for plagiarizing stuff doesn't make much sense. But that's what we think about when we start thinking about, do we prosecute the model for owning material and regurgitating material that it doesn't have ownership of? That ownership notion is complicated. So there's a bit more about facts and truth in this landscape.
I think
But the dangerous thing about AI, though, is that if a human being is sort of at the limits of their memory, they'll say, gee, I think this is true. I'm not sure, but AI always produces a response that sounds convincing, usually, that there aren't any qualifiers typically. And at my law firm, we got a notice from our firm's general counsel that we weren't supposed to use ChatGPT in preparing legal pleadings because there's a case in New York where lawyers did that. And the AI just made up cases that did not exist. And those lawyers are potentially subject to sanctions now over that. And then similarly, when the New York Times was writing in the very early days when ChatGPT was rolled out, one reporter famously engaged in a dialogue with the chat bot. And as the conversation went on, the AI got sort of to the limits of its capacity and started hallucinating, and basically was suggesting that the reporter, leave their wife and leave his wife, and trying to break up the reporter's marriage, which is a very bizarre conversation, which made for a great story.
Yeah, I think that was Kevin Rouse. To go back to what Doyle said, ChatGPT is trained to be obsequious, and it'll keep trying to come up with plausible answers, even at past the point where they would be, thought to be plausible by any reasonable person. But whether or not you could train it to be more circumspect, I think is an ongoing research question at the moment. In the case of Kevin's flirtation with Bing, I think in the early days of Bing, I think he kind of entrapped it. Bing is capable of writing a story about a hypothetical situation in which you're trying to convince a reporter to leave its wife. I think he kind of hypothetically wandered into a piece of the space where it gave him what he thought he was looking for. And, I think if we saw the entire transcript, I'm not trying to exonerate that propensity, but I'm saying that level of fiction is something that these language models are perfectly capable of doing. And, if you've got some time later today, I say to everyone, go ahead and tinker with this thing and just throw it some fictional scenarios and keep upping the game. There's something a researcher called Terry Sejnowski referred to as the reverse Turing test with ChatGPT. The smarter you are in your language in talking to it, the more highbrow the responses you will get. So if you think some of the scenarios you get from your simple prompts are simplistic and badly written, up your game in prompting it, and that'll drive it into a part of the contextual space where it'll bring you back stuff that sounds smarter. That works. And it's once again, it's what you would expect, something that's being driven by what context you're giving it and this immense knowledge of having read 100 million books. It's just as a piece of research on human language itself and linguistics and our propensities for saying what we do and, trillions of conversations never completed. Those are all in there. That's what's cool about this. And obviously, Are there dragons there? Plenty of them, you know. Promise and peril.
Yeah, it's kind of cool and scary. I come to a lot of this, although I'm writing fiction now. I spent most of my career as a journalist, and factual accuracy is of the utmost importance. But I wanted to jump over, I think John wanted to jump in with a comment.
Yeah, so I'm gonna share one thing here on my screen.
A little louder.
Hopefully, what I'm able to share on the screen, you can see.
Good.
Hopefully it'll come up.
See, it has you. Yeah,
There we
we got it.
Okay. So this was a prompt I put into an AI art generator based upon a character I created. And it was a pretty good estimation based upon, you know, how he would look, how I described it. And I was pleased with it. But one of the things that I made sure that I did is to let people who I shared this image with know that it was AI generated, because I'm a visual artist and I didn't want them to assume that I had created this using my own talents by hand, and that it was my actual artwork. It was a prompt, you know, that was given to a computer program, and this is what it came up with. Plus, I would never give anyone 5 fingers. You know, the point of the matter is that this is one aspect of how AI can be helpful. I would never pass this off as anything other than AI inspired artwork, because I can pick apart all of the flaws in this. I mean, as a visual artist, I can go, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. I could do that readily. But the layperson would think, oh man, this is just the best thing. Oh my God, this looks so great. And they see this and they aren't able to discern what's wrong with it. That this is just a template. This is just a visualization of something that was in my head that I wanted to share quickly to drive anticipation for my writing. And that's all this was. Some people, they think, oh, wow, you know, this is it, but it's not. This is just a little snippet thing, a little thing that I did to share and experiment with the technology. And I think that when we get into AI right now, it's in its infancy. When it grows to the point where, you know, we're anticipating it to grow, I think that we have to make sure that we are changing what we do specifically and what other people do specifically, and how they use it. And to go back to Russell's point about using it for research, that's great, but I don't think it's sophisticated enough at this point for me to trust it with the kind of research that I would like for it to be able to do. And I'm no expert in how in use of it. I've only been dabbling with it, but you know, when it comes down to it, will we be able to use this as a research assistant? Hopefully. I don't know, maybe in my lifetime. I've got more years behind me than ahead of me, statistically speaking. But you know, maybe who knows? But I think that we have to really take a look at everything from how great this could be, because it has great potential, and how it really needs to be regulated.
Well, what you're bringing up a couple of really good areas and good discussion points. But I just wanted to point out that I looked at that drawing and I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. And then I looked at the hand, I'm thinking, well, that's a little off. But that's the only, I'm not an artist, so I'm not a graphic artist. So that would have been probably okay with me. Yeah, I would, but it's okay with me. But I'm not a graphic artist and I wouldn't presume to create in that area because I don't have the tools and I don't have the, background that you have. But when it comes to writing, yeah, I do know something about writing. And when I tried out Chat GPT I had it like outline the novel that I'm already working on, and I've already got it out. I just wanted to see what it would do when I plugged in the topics, and I tried to make it, to your point, Brian, I tried to make it as sophisticated and as detailed as possible, because I remember some of our early discussions when we were preparing, and it came up with a passable outline. But what's missing from that outline, and what I think is missing from, I plugged in a couple of things that I'm working on from a couple of short stories to see what it would do. And I'm thinking, it's passable, and somebody who's not a writer or a creator would look at that and say, hey, this is okay. But in reality, I'm thinking, I see the cliche, I see the very superficiality in it. It doesn't have a sense of realism at all. So I think as writers, we can kind of see the flaws. The real challenge is how do we make it clear to readers who might not have the skill and the training that we have to look at a piece of AI generated art, or to look at an AI generated story and say, it's okay as far as it goes. However, it's lacking, and we can kind of fill in the blanks. How do we tell that, and how do we, as creators, help educate our readers and the people who are using our rough.
Okay, well, I'm gonna throw this at Doyle, because I think that the same approaches that we've used for years now to train these big generative AI tools can be used to develop engines that will do this kind of evaluation. What do you think, Doyle?
I do. And as I listen to things about just the scope of how much to use these things, I want to offer one quick rule of thumb, which is, I'll call it small bites. Let this thing help you in small bites. If you're writing, let's look at a paragraph at a time. Punch this up for me. If you say something like, write me a whole chapter or a whole novel, of course, that's going to be ridiculous. Reese mentioned the legal case where somebody had ChatGPT do something and they turned it in clearly without verifying if this was real or not.
Yeah.
What a fool, first of all. But those things happen. Writing code, you can't say, just build me an app that does such and such in 3 sentences and you're done. Don't tell it to do the entire thing. Let it do small bites that you can look at and say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'll let this now add to the building blocks. And I didn't expect to quote Reagan today, but trust but verify. Trust what it says, but go ahead and verify what it says, and therefore do small bites so that you can actually do some verification as you go to make sure that the facts are there, the vetting that you need to do to pass something along that is going to expect to be accurate and truthful. Just do that level of due diligence by keeping the bites small. Did that answer what, Janet, you started with a question? I don't know if I went too far off of that.
But the question was, using the same kind of technology, we could, and you and I and a few other people might be able to generate a tool to evaluate, to be able to detect, was this written by AI or not, for example. No,
Yeah, I'm not hopeful. I mean, there's talk about watermarks, there's talk about putting some technology in there, but if you do something really small with it, if it's a 10 or 20 or 30 word thing, what among those words is going to indicate where does the watermark live in something like that? If it's much longer, maybe, but
well, all right. So if I've led you into this. All right, so we can't do that. So how in the world are you going to be able to enforce when you say you can't use anything generated by AI? You can't ever go back and prove that it was.
I agree. And that's why I talk in lofty terms about the future that is different from the things that we think of right now. You have a group of students. You expect them to write honest things. You expect to be able to to detect when they're plagiarizing. I don't have a good description of how that goes forward. That standard of doing things, that way of doing things, has to give way to something else that emphasizes what creative thinkers have their tools help them do, rather than confirm that it's 100% from this human and it's not assisted by anything. It's like calculators in grade school in the 70s. Should we let them in the building or not? At first we didn't, but of course we did eventually. And it maybe crippled people a little from being able to do things automatically by themselves, but it was slide rules before that. And again, this is a new era of people assisted by sidekicks and co-pilots and tools. And thinking about things in those terms is the best way forward, because status quo stuff is hard to detect and defend, and leave it like it was is going to be challenging.
Yeah, watermarking is easy for visual stuff, hard for language.
Well, Reeves, I wanted, how is your law firm enforcing the edict that there shall be no AI generated briefs?
Good
Well,
question.
they're just telling people not to do it, and Doyle's right. Yeah, that it's a dumb thing to do to take case citations that are produced by Chat GPT and without checking them. So those lawyers deserve to get into trouble for that. But I think to also what Doyle was saying, I think that AI sort of changes our expectations of a lot of things. Like I heard a teacher talking about the essays that he's receiving now from his students, written essays. And so many of them are now relying on Chat GPT. And because he sees many essays on the same topic, he can detect just the tone. He can tell when a student is using it. And at first he thought, well, I can never assign an essay again. I'm going to stop teaching. What's the point anymore? But it also kind of threw him back on basic principles of, what am I really trying to accomplish with teaching? Maybe it's not about, producing a particular kind of essay, but something else. And similarly, I think with writing fiction, AI sort of calls a lot of basic things into question. Is the point of a book to have, a thriller with certain basic generic plot mechanics and certain functional but sometimes a little wonky sentences, or is it something else, something a little more meaningful? But so I guess it just sort of changes the paradigm and makes you think about kind of first principles a little bit.
Well, I just know I just wouldn't want to be teaching right now. I taught at the end of my career for several years journalism at Franklin College, and frankly, I wouldn't want to have to try to figure out whether their work was generated by an AI model or self-generated. I think that's a huge challenge.
There's been no technology that's sort of been adopted this fast. I mean, it's changing everything like instantly.
It is this writer strike. A quick note about the writer strike in play right now. This started partly because of streaming, but the big sticking point there was a sentence that said there shall be no AI assistance with writers doing what they do. That was the initial point. And it's already too late to assert something like that. Whatever this contract ends up being, it's going to have to say something instead like, and that's where I struggle to even offer what an example language would be. Is it some ratio of what's there? But the reality is people with robot assistance will be the new reality. The instant assumption is that means there's fewer writers, but instead let's imagine the same number of writers, but doing more productive things by being orchestrators of a system of things that's not just from their own heads. And boy, I'm struggling to even imagine what that sentence is like. But until that sentence is laid in that contract, that will stay open. And because to detect, like it must be pure, well then let's have a detector that detects it, and there is no such thing. So it's keep your eye on that for how this entire thing moves forward in contractual language that is holding some.
And how people are dealing with this, I'll just mention one example. I'm a member of a professional society called the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, or IEEE. 450,000 members worldwide. It's one of the largest. And they just issued guidelines on using generative AI. And you know what the guideline is? It says you can't do it unless you specify in each paragraph that you used AI for, you say so. Well, guess what happens then? They kick the can down the road to the editors, and it's up to the editors to decide what to do with that. To me, that's a non-answer. But it's the kind of thing we're seeing over and over again. And, backing way up to the top, I think we have a topic here that we should be discussing at the heads of state level as we discuss nuclear weapons. It is going to be that revolutionary. And until we back up and realize that, all of this, the enforcement means nothing. I mean, generally, there's no way to enforce anything we've been talking about.
Well, I do know there's been some discussion that maybe that the United States and the European Union really need to get together and put down some parameters around the use of AI. Again, I know coming at it from a perspective of a journalist for whom factual accuracy is paramount. What do you do when there's a commercial on television, showing, Joe Biden doing something outrageous or saying something outrageous that he never really said? Things attributed to people that they never really did. Can you spark international incidents by, distributing a video that shows atrocities that never happened? These are all kinds of things that have huge implications, not only for the functioning of, democracies around the world, but security. Like, how do we, like, what are the security issues around this, and where are the risks there? I mean, there's potential for fake news stories, fake photos, and we see a lot of that now. We see a lot of phony stuff that's been manufactured using, the tools of the past. Who knows how that can explode? And our ability to detect and take it apart is really important.
That's already being done through manipulation of context. I mean, and that's not even AI generated. So to your point, just imagine how much work it can be. We're already experiencing this because people are taking things out of context and putting them out there. Just imagine how much worse when you're dealing with manipulated video or manipulated sound bites or something along those lines. And then the really kicker over the past 5 years here is alternate facts. I wanted to shoot the television when I heard someone utter that stupidity. I was like, all of my brain was being compressed into jello. I mean, what?
Idiocy.
Yes, but you know what? People will perpetuate these types of things for their own gain, of course, their own notoriety, their ego, and that's one of the most dangerous aspects of humanity, greed and ego, because those two things will drive people to do unspeakable things. And and to your point, Doyle, how do you regulate? It's so difficult. We know it needs to be regulated, but how do we do that?
Yeah, I saw, I'm going to read this because I read it off the internet last night. Quote, "We can't even regulate international trade in drugs, weapons, or people. What makes you think we can regulate something with the potential to be even more powerful and profitable?"
Right. We can't even regulate ourselves half the time, which is really just sad.
Well, we're kind of winding down. We scheduled this program for an hour and a half, and I know a few people attending have other places to be and things to do on this probably pretty hot, wherever wherever everybody is. Anyhow, so what's next? What's next for AI? And if each panelist could kind of weigh in on that, if what is next and
Well,
you see in the AI revolution?
I'm going to jump into just two things that have happened in the last few days. We have two new big AI engines. Well, three actually. Apple is about to come out with theirs, but we have two new GPTs that I've just noticed within the last week. Worm GPT, which basically says we're going to generate. We're not held accountable to any kind of regulation or anything else. We're going to go out and write all the malware we can. We're going to generate ransomware and so on. And the other one is, and I'm not making this up, brand new AI engine called Fraud GPT, which is out there for people to generate fraudulent activities, scams, and so on to make them money. And unfortunately, along with all these nice things we think our future AI is going to do, this is what we're going to be facing. And as my older son puts it, who's involved in the industry, it's scaring him shitless. Pardon my French.
Scaring us all.
John, what's next for AI?
Not to sound the bells of doom, but to sound the bells of doom. AI is going to permeate into every facet of our lives, and we are going to be hard pressed to determine what is or is not real. And it's going to take a lot of discernment on our part, a lot of skepticism on our part. But until I think some laws on what type of AI and applications of AI are enacted, it's just going to be the wild, wild west out here. We're going to see it all, and we're going to have to try and determine what is or is not real.
Reese, what's next for AI, do you think?
Well, regulation. I think that typically laws take a long time to catch up with technology, but in the case of AI, I think it's really gotten the attention. It's scared a lot of people. And so I think we're going to see privacy and other regulation happen a lot sooner in the evolution of the technology. And one thing I saw just the other day, an email from a company that helps self-published authors with covers and formatting and all that. And they now offer a feature on the covers of books to indicate that a book was generated 100% by a human being, not AI. And the fact that we've already gotten to that point where you have to defend that a book was written by a human being, just demonstrates how fast things are moving.
Thank you. Brian,
Um,
what's next?
And I'm going to quote Terry Sejmowski again. He observed that ChatGPT has what they call 175 billion parameters to do what it does. By parameters, they actually mean things that are modeled after the synapses in our brain. He pointed out that an area of brain tissue with an equivalent number of synapses is about the size of a human thumbnail. And we're capable of generating models that are able to perform in a few seconds things that would take us hours or days. Where it goes from here is the capacity to do a lot better than that is out there. And it's going to be fascinating to see what happens when that really starts to emerge in spades.
Doyle, I'm giving you the last word. What's next for AI?
Oh boy. What's next is kind of on two levels, because there's the whole world figuring out things. I know that regs will come soon. Reese is right about the awareness, but we're behind on regulating the social media world in the first place. There's great harms coming from that. The laws still struggle to catch up and keep up with that in a meaningful way. So I'm hopeful, but it might take a while for that. In the meantime, for individual people to just do their own adaptation, whether it's your job that's a livelihood or it's more of a personal endeavor, being a creative writing. You're here at a group of creative writers deciding how to go about this next. I love what Reese said about the 100% authentic human produced thing. That is a strategy to defend what you, that's one extreme. Keep being 100% organic, leave these tools aside, market your material that way. You will have an audience that insists on the artisanalness of real human content. Others will do it the other way. There's a blend, there's a world that includes both of these going forward. So just get to know these tools on your own with hand-to-hand research like you've already done, kicking the tires on these tools today like we did. I encourage you to do that because that's part of your personal understanding of how these work or don't work, how they can work for you to make your job enhanced by these tools with new sidekicks and co-pilots. To figure out how to coexist in that world is a personal level adaptation that is, I think, the best hopeful way forward for individuals.
Well, we're going to wrap this up. Really thank our panelists, Ross, John, Doyle, Brian, Reese. Really appreciate your contributions. A lot of food for thought. And I guarantee that if we had this panel discussion a month from now, we'd be talking about some different issues as well, because this technology is changing very quickly. Really appreciate everybody who dropped in on our meeting today. Thank you very much. We got to some of the questions, but didn't get to everybody's.
But I'd like to say that there was a whole side discussion going in chat.
Yes.
And I followed that, and in fact, I have saved the chat, so.
So we'll make the chat available if we can figure out the technology, which should be pretty ironic
Ask
considering.
ChatGPT for help and it'll tell you how to do it.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. And
Thanks all.
thank you.
Thanks.